super excited to be here with Startup Boston, and just want to thank you all for tuning into this today. I have to tell you, if I'm being honest and authentic, I am a little nervous. So we're under thunderstorm watch, a severe thunderstorm watch. So if anything flips, like if I disappear, you'll know why. It's not because I don't want to be here. It's just because I was tossed off. But I am so excited to be here. I am not going to spend very much time talking about myself, except to say that I am the managing director and co-founder of a company called Development Dynamics. And we are here to talk about helping you guys to find your authentic sales style. So a few things I want to talk about to start with. Core philosophy. At Development Dynamics, our core philosophy around business development is really based on the following. One, we want you guys to think about giving and not taking. To us, business development is really a state of mind. It is a mindset. It is really kind of how you wake up, how you live your life. You don't compartmentalize. You really are open to what is ahead. And it's kind of like a matchmaker mentality. You're always thinking of ways to give, to introduce someone, to connect someone else, to help someone else solve a problem, rather than taking to every experience what someone else can do for you or what this can do for you. So number one core philosophy is give. Knowing and showing yourself is also really, really, really important. If you're going to develop your own authentic style, you have to kind of know yourself pretty well and ask yourself some interesting and sometimes challenging questions about what your strengths and weaknesses, what do you naturally bring to this effort, and certainly feeling vulnerable enough to allow other people to get to know you. It's really, really important in developing your own authentic style and being successful. Knowing those in your network, what do they really care about? It's really important to take the time to understand what the problems are of those who you are planning on working with, that you do work with, that you know. You need to know what they really care about and what's important to them, what their priorities are. You got to be able to spend your time wisely. Business development, for many people, the idea of selling, which we're going to get to in a minute, all the many objections that people have and think about when the word selling even comes up, makes them super uncomfortable. So many of you are founders. You have a million different responsibilities that you have. Selling is not your job. However, as you know, we all sell, whether we're selling our brand, we're selling our ideas, we're all selling. So it's really important to be very intentional and to walk with purpose in your actions and to be efficient. And so for us, we try to find points of intersection. If we're trying to find our authentic sales style or business development style, we try to encourage everyone to think about, what are the things that you're really good at? What are the things that you enjoy? What are you passionate about? And how you can find those points of intersection with those in your network. So when you're incorporating your life and business development and the things that you care about, it's not just you setting aside extra time to do business development. So if you, for instance, are really passionate about children's charities, then that's something that you should be able to incorporate with your business development efforts. So it's not extra, it's bringing more to what you're already doing and being efficient. Small, consistent actions. I don't know if anyone ever used Noom, for instance, and thinking about like dieting. You know, if someone has a goal and they want to lose 30 pounds, you can't lose 30 pounds overnight, right? You have to create small actions every single day, and maybe you lose a pound a week, 2 pounds every 2 weeks, and eventually you get to your ultimate goal. And that's what we're all about, is helping everyone and having you guys all think about those big goals that you want to achieve, but how can you take action every day, smaller actions that are going to end up having a very large impact. If we Google business development, the definition, this is what comes up. I'm not going to read it to you, but business development, you know, for us, we think of the creation of long-term value for an organization from customers, markets, and relationships. Relationships for us, that's what it's about. Relationships are the core of everything. So when anyone uses the word sell, selling, sales, salespeople, when we talk to people about selling, this is kind of like, what we get. A lot of people who aren't salespeople, and even salespeople themselves, are uncomfortable sometimes being called salespeople. So we want to kind of think about, why is that? And if you're going to, again, come up with your style that's authentic, a good starting point is to really think about, I'm sure all of you have heard of a SWOT analysis, but let's think about, what are you coming with? What are the blocks? What are the objections or the obstacles that prevent you from currently, right now, doing the stuff that you should be doing in the business development world? So the number one objection that we get, we work with a lot of professionals, leaders, managing partners, CEOs. We work with a lot of the professionals who serve the C-suite. Some of them might be billable at a really high rate. So time is the number one objection. No one has the time to take away from clients, to take away from their companies, to take away from their families. Maybe they're a marathon runner in addition. They just don't have a lot of time, which is, again, why, we would like you to think about how you can literally incorporate business development into your everyday, develop that mindset where it's just natural and it's not something that you have to find time to do in a little, when you're not busy. Because let's face it, we're busy all the time. Some of the other objections, we get, people are really uncomfortable with the idea. Probably one of the most common things that we get, or questions that we get, is how do I turn I'm uncomfortable with personal relationships, converting them or pivoting them to professional ones. I don't want people to think I'm using them. I don't want people to think I'm a used car salesman. I don't want people to think I'm sleazy. And so understanding kind of what your blocks are and what's keeping you back from doing certain things or taking action is really, really important. And then discovering what you can do to either leverage what your natural tendencies are, or remediating and working around some of those things that you're having trouble with. So for instance, one of the strategies, that we talk about when you have friends and family and neighbors, and you're really uncomfortable about talking to them in a professional way. One of the best things to do is just asking questions of people. It is the number one important business development strategy, is learn about people, learn about what they're doing. Ask your friends about their jobs and their careers and what they're doing and what kind of challenges they're having. Ask and listen. And when you ask and you ask them and people start opening up, it obviously gives you and enables you to have an opportunity to kind of think about, well, these are some of the challenges they have. I wonder if I can help them. Another way to think about when you're having trouble is with friends and family, is thinking about, I don't have to sell anyone anything. Maybe if I have a friend, perhaps they have a lot of friends that would be helpful to me, and I think I can solve a lot of problems of the friends that they have. And maybe really, rather than asking them for business or asking to them to be my client, maybe the best thing would be to talk to them about the people that they know and ask for help and say, a lot of these people. That would be such a great introduction for me. Would you be willing to introduce me to these other people that have those relationships? So kind of thinking about what you are comfortable with, the status of that relationship, which we're going to get into a lot later, is really trying to make you feel more comfortable, finding small things, small activities that give you confidence and help you build momentum. We also get a lot of I don't know. I don't know. People are afraid to embark on business development because they don't know what questions to ask. They don't want to feel stupid. A lot of the people we deal with are really high achievers, really, really, really smart people. No one likes to feel uncomfortable, and no one likes to feel like they don't know what they're doing. Sometimes they don't know where to find targets. If you are a founder, CEO, you might really need to find, you need to find capital, and you need to know where these the right venture capitalists, the right investors are. And you might have trouble finding that or having access to that. And so taking a step back and thinking, if you don't know where they are, who do you know already that might have that knowledge, that might be able to point you in the right direction, that might be sitting next to the types of people you need to get to know in order to raise capital. And so finding out, what you don't know and who are the people or where you can find that information to help you resolve some of those questions is really, really important, and certainly unique to each one of you. When we think about business development, again, we don't want you to think about selling. We're not selling, even if you are the founder of a company who is selling widgets, and you need to build a sales force, or you need to look for investors to invest in the company. There's a lot of ways to go forward in the marketplace, whether you are selling product, you're selling services, you're selling your brand, you're selling your ideas in a way that's not about you taking and it's about deepening relationships with people. It's thinking about the actual tasks and the processes that are related to cultivating and deepening relationships that will put you in the best position to solve problems and help those who are most important. And there's a lot in that sentence, but that's really, really, really what it's about. And we have found in many of our discussions over the last many years, actually, in working with our clients, is stop thinking about selling someone anything. And it's a much more comfortable place for many of us to think about how we can best help someone. And the best way to help people is getting to know what their problems are, and certainly having the right resources to be able to help them, right? So in order to help people, you have to understand them. In order to understand them, you got to be able to spend a lot of time with them. You have to understand their challenges. You have to understand their needs. You have to understand their priorities. And in order to do that, you really have to spend time. Unfortunately, business development, there's no quick fix. There's no cool app or the perfect technology. There's certainly tools out there that will help you perhaps be better at reporting, that will help give you some visibility into your ROI. But at the end of the day, it is a marathon. It is not a sprint. It is about people. It is about relationships. And in order to really develop and deepen those relationships, they need time. There's trust. And you have to think about how you can best develop those trusts and deepen those relationships, and what actions you need to take in order to be able to do that. So, this isn't rocket science stuff. This is, it's pretty simple. And it's actually a lot of the things that you learned about when you went to kindergarten, when you were young and you went to school, and things that your parents told you, or if you have kids, things that you tell your kids about making friends. And if you think back to some of those lessons and messages that we all, tell our kids, or that we were told, the number one thing is to be yourself. No one's going to trust you or feel comfortable with you if you're trying to be someone that you're not. I think even when we are ourselves, many of us, certainly a lot of women, suffer from imposter syndrome. So it is even more important to be yourself. And in order to be yourself, you have to be comfortable in your own skin. You have to be vulnerable enough. You have to be willing to kind of put yourself out there. And you have to be able to be willing to start conversations about things that interest others. You can't talk about you, and you can't just talk about your business and why you're the hero in your own life. You really need to be starting conversations about things that other people care about, that interest them, and asking them those questions. So you can learn about what interests them. And you have to really listen. Again, the offering help, asking for help, very, very, very important. I don't know if anyone remembers being 3 or 4 and there were a bunch of kids playing blocks and building some cool tower, and you really thought that was the coolest thing, and you wanted to enter that circle of play and you didn't know how to do it. And the best advice would always be offer help. ask if you can help build something, or what can you do that will help them. It's a really great way to get involved and develop relationships with people. Finding things that you have in common and being able to share meaningful experiences is really, really important. Obviously, number one in being good at business development is you have to be really good at what you do. You have to be seen as being really, that's a given. Baseline is you have to be really, really good. You have to make sure that your skills are up to the level that they need to be. You have to be seen as an expert. And then after that, it's not all about what happens in the boardroom or in the office or at a presentation. It's really those other experiences where people let their guard down, where people are vulnerable and share things that are important to them, that allow you to be the most meaningful. So we want you to be thinking about those things. When we look at rainmakers, we look at rainmakers for a lot of reasons. I think people that everyone knows, people that just have that DNA that like you can just think of. If I say the word rainmaker, I'm sure everyone has someone that they can think of that is just so good at it. They don't even have to think about it. They walk into a room and they're like a magnet, right? They're so good at connecting everyone. And we study rainmakers carefully, because we don't think everyone can be a rainmaker because they don't have the DNA. They're not necessarily hardwired. But we believe in, by studying rainmakers and thinking about what makes a rainmaker, the traits, the networks, the actions that rainmakers take, we think by looking at those things, we can copy certain things that they do, leverage those strengths that we naturally bring, and become better business developers. So a rainmaker is really a culmination of being a great connector, that matchmaker. They are constantly matching people up with other relationships, clients, referrals, or information or ways to solve problems. They're really good at closing. They're never afraid. They understand everything that leads up to closing, understanding how to prioritize needs, and understanding what someone's afraid of losing if they were to sign on with you. They have that skill set to be able to do that. They're creative. And they're mavens, like they're seen as the gurus. And if they're smart, if they're not necessarily all of those things, sometimes great rainmakers are smart enough to know where their weaknesses, and they partner with maybe the person who is the biggest maven, or the person who's really comfortable at closing, or the person that has all the great relationships. And so they can form a rainmaking team. When we think of, going kind of digging in a little deeper with rainmakers, and we think about all the traits, I want you guys to really look at these traits and think about, what do you have in common? What are traits that you also share and you have in common with a rainmaker? So are you someone who's a giver, or are you that person that's always taking and you're not giving back? Or are you someone that's always expecting someone to give you referrals, but you never give referrals back? Are you someone who's a team builder, or are you that person that like always needs credit? You always need to be that person who's doing it yourself, and you have your own agenda. Do you have empathy? Are you someone that can see how someone else's, or put yourself in someone else's shoes and really understand where they're coming from and what they might care about? Or are you someone that's really only focused and thinking about what you need to get across and what your pain is? Are you someone who thrives from personal relationships? Or are you someone that compartmentalizes your relationships and kind of keeps family and friends and business completely separate? We've had clients like those that compartmentalize, and they segregate their potatoes from their steak, from their applesauce. And we're like, you can't do that. In order to really accentuate what your style is and share yourself in a meaningful way with others, you really kind of have to allow yourself to be vulnerable and let people in and see you as you truly are. We had a client who ran the tax department for one of the top accounting firms, and he had this idea that he had to be very buttoned up, and what someone who was an accountant, what people thought this accountant, he did not want to share with people that he was actually the lead singer of an R&B band and super talented, because he thought they wouldn't respect him as an accountant. And so through our engagement, we told him he really needed to embrace that side. And that was such a great, that set him apart. He was clearly a great accountant. He was great at what he did. But this kind of made him different and set him apart, and sharing that passion, and inviting his clients and sharing that with them, enabled him to really kind of embrace who he was and shine in a way that made him feel so much more comfortable and become so much more effective in his relationships. So it's really, really, really important. You also have to be able to take risks. You have to be that person who's willing to have the party and realize maybe no one's going to come, but I have to put myself out there. Like for me today, I didn't know when I signed up for this. Maybe there's nobody out there that's really, that really wants to hear what I have to say, but you have to really put yourself out there and be willing to deal with it and be resilient, that if people don't come or that you hear no a lot, that you keep going. Rainmakers don't ever really just hear no. Rainmakers and good business developers hear kind of, maybe it's not right now, but I'm going to get them. I'm going to find a way down the road. So they're tough. They look for ways to pivot. They don't get blocked by obstacles in front of them. They look for ways around them. And so I want all of you to kind of think about which one of these. I was talking for a long time, so you could have enough time to look at this slide and think about what traits you have. What can you leverage that you already are naturally inclined to do and to be? What are some of those traits that we can leverage in order to make you better at business development? The next thing we like to look at are, what are the networks of rainmakers? Rainmakers and great business developers have very diverse networks. If you're in the financial, legal, or corporate arena, which I suspect everyone on this call probably is, the more diverse the network you have, the more effective you will be at business development. So being really visible in the community, having lots of community contacts, having industry experts in your industry, regulatory experts, being on boards and having relationships with your fellow board members, whether they be nonprofit or corporate, relationships with venture capitalists, private equity, and all the people who serve the private equity and those venture capitalist firms and investors. Really important to have relationships, because hopefully not everyone's going to know all the VCs, but hopefully people that do, that sit next to those VCs, or that can tell you where the perfect VCs who share a strategy with you, where they are. Knowing the trade organizations to belong to and the leaders of those organizations, attorneys, headhunters, other local businesses, all very, very, very important that you have a very diverse network, and not just in career or job or focus, but also in age. True rainmakers and business developers, really good business developers, have, their contacts are of all different ages and walks of life. And there's reasons for that. It's really important when you're 20s and your 30s, very, very important to develop those peer relationships, because even though maybe a lot of your relationships will not be in yet positions of decision-making power, maybe they are, maybe they're not, you want to grow up, you grow up together. And many of the relationships that we rely on when you're my age, when you're old, were all relationships that I developed in my 20s and 30s. And that's not to say that if you're in your 50s or 60s, you can't make new friends and develop new relationships, but you will never have such a critical mass and such, opportunity as you do when you're 20 and 30, and to develop deep relationships over a long period of time. However, as you get older and your relationships get older, in order for you to stay current, you still have to cultivate relationships with younger people. If I'm not talking to younger people and people in their 20s or 30s, I have no clue. I'm not kind of tuned into what their challenges are and what their issues are. So over time, it's important when you think about your network, do you have a diverse enough network where when, the more diverse it is, the more problems you can solve. It's really that simple. The more resources you have to draw on, the more people you can introduce and connect to the other people in your network to solve their problems. And certainly knowing people at different ages keeps you current, and it's super important. When we look at the activities, which is the third kind of piece of the puzzle here when we look at Rainmakers, what are they doing? How do they engage with all these people in their network? How did they use the things that they're good at, their natural traits and strengths, and like how do they use them to actively engage with the important people in their network? It might be, they do a lot of family outings. For me, when I started out in my old business that I was in for over 20 years, it was in financial printing. So a lot of my clients were the C-suite of corporations who were going public or who were public, and all the people that served them, like their lawyers, their bankers, accountants, etc. And it was very male dominated when I started. Many of my clients were men. All of my competitors were men. Most of my colleagues were men. And how I engaged with the people in my network, being a young woman, was really very different and had to be. I had to really find kind of my lane. And I had to think about, what do I enjoy? What do they like? How do I find those points of intersection? And what's important to them? What do they care about? And so, like I said, assuming baseline, I had to make sure they knew that their business was like I looked at my business as their business just as importantly as they do. But I had to think about, what are the things that they care about? And one of the things that all my clients cared about, because they were doing deals, was being away from their families. So I tried to find ways where I could incorporate them spending time with their families and me in a meaningful way that their families would care about. We would further and deepen our relationship. And so I did a lot of family stuff, whether it was inviting clients to like the preview of a Harry Potter the day before it was released. And they got to be heroes with their kids, or I did a lot of brunches on the weekend instead of playing golf, because I hate golf. No offense to golfers, but golf was just not my thing. Though golf is a great activity because you can have a foursome and you can bring other people together. For me, it just wasn't my thing. So I would bring people together for dinners at new restaurants, or bring people to invite them to speak on panels where they could meet other people, show off their expertise, network. So it's really kind of thinking about what activities are going to be the most meaningful to the people in my network that they're going to enjoy, that I also enjoy as well. So thinking about what that is for you. Maybe you're an expert. Maybe you're a lead singer of an R&B band. Maybe you are an amazing photographer. We had someone who was also a really great singer. And some of the most important targets he had were involved in the boards of some nursing homes. And so one of the things he did was he would go in hospice, when people were in hospice, he would go sing to them. And that was something that was really, really important to some really important people in his network. And it was a skill that he had, a talent that he had, that he could share in a meaningful way. So we want you to kind of think about, what are activities that you can think of so you can find better ways to engage with those key people in your network. Now, all this stuff for us comes up with asking a lot of questions, thinking about what you naturally bring to this whole idea of business development. Like, what are you good at? What are you not good at? Because we want you to be able to identify actions that you can take that are practical, that are going to help either leverage the things that you're naturally good at, or remediate what you're not good at, or maybe just kind of neutralize. So it's a good idea to really kind of do that SWOT and think about, where are those opportunities, and then identify specific actions. If you're, if looking at that slide of the of your network and realizing, you know what, oh my God, like my network is just not diverse enough. What are specific things that I can do to spend time with the kinds of people that I need to be meeting? That's a specific action that you can take to remediate that. If you are really good at developing relationships, but you're having trouble advancing those relationships, like, a lot of people, you go out to lunch. We get this a lot with some of the people that we work with. Like, I know a lot of people, we get along really well, but then nothing ever happens. And so having goals and assigning goals and thinking about very specific action and follow up and being intentional in every meeting, every phone call, every lunch, having a very specific goal. And the goal could be as small as you just want to get to know them better. You want to understand their new job. Maybe you want to learn if they have kids. Maybe you want to learn about they just got married and how that's going. Maybe it's, they just got funded and you want to know, what are they going to do with all that money? You want to know, that these guys are going to be running out of money, and you want to know, like, how much time do they have? How can I help? Every conversation, every meeting, you should have a goal or group of goals that are practical, that you can act on, and that then you can follow up on. And that helps advance the activities and the relationships and move them forward. You never leave a meeting, you never leave a conversation until you have something to act on. It could be one of the best things to do is, who's a really good introduction for you? Who can I introduce you to? What's someone that you need to meet? That's always a really good one. And then that's your follow-up. And that's how you extend and advance these relationships. But we want you to think about looking at who you already know. What are the traits that you already have? How do you like? What do you care about? What do you enjoy? And finding those points of intersection. So it's not extra, it's not drudgery, it's not like tedious, but you can kind of incorporate what your passions are, what those are of the people in your network, and find meaningful points of intersection. And we think that will really help kind of demystify the world of business development and make you more intentional. So in doing, by the way, I'm trying to think does anyone, I feel like I'm talking a lot and talking very quickly. So if Stephanie, I don't know if you're here. You're not here. So we'll save questions for a little bit. Oh,
here right now.
There you are. I thought now might be a little good time if anyone has any questions so far to break in.
It's so funny. I was thinking that too. I was like, okay, like we're over halfway through the breaking point, and we have over 80 people here listening in too, but not one question so far. So guys, if you have questions, we are over halfway through this. So this is your time, and I'm sure you're all diligently writing notes, which I personally love. But this is like your gentle reminder that if you have questions, it's now or never, basically. Okay? So use that Q&A tab. And then Dorothy, I figure I'll mute myself and keep an eye out, and we'll still let you lead the charge here in the meantime. Make sense?
Hopefully everyone's still alive out there and I haven't put you to sleep and you're all awake. But anyway, want you to think about what your goals are, because that's going to frame the actions that you take. Thinking about what strengths and opportunities that you already have or that you possess that will help you hit your goals, and thinking about the weaknesses and threats that might exist that might prevent you from hitting those goals. So think about like what you need to learn. Who do you need to meet? What do you already know, or who do you already know that can help you? How will you find and engage those people? And how can you further the rapport and trust with those people in your network? So if you all could take 5 minutes, grab a piece of paper and a pen. And also, if this, in doing this little exercise, you have a question, give it to Stephanie so we can talk about it. But I want you to write, each of you, I'd like you to write down 4 goals. One big overarching goal, it could be my company needs to get funded. It might be I need to be revenue positive. Big overarching goal. And then 3 smaller goals that are going to lead up to and help you if you achieve those 3 smaller goals that will help you with the big overarching goal. So I'd like you to write those 4 goals down. And then I want you to think about 3 specific actions that you're going to take over the next 6 to 12 months that will help you achieve those goals. I want you to think about how much time you can commit to those actions per week. Maybe it's 4 hours, maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's, a day a week, something that's practical. There's a certain level of business development or a certain side of business development that's like requires research, requires administrative tasks, thought. How much time can you dedicate to those things in order to create some momentum and act upon some of these goals. And I want you to think about which days, if it's every day, that you will work on business development and block that out on your calendar. What we've found is it's really important to create muscle memory. You have to practice. And I have a family of big tennis players. And in order to learn a new serve or acquire a new grip and make those kind of changes, you have to maybe hit at least a couple thousand balls until you have that muscle memory. And then once you do have that muscle memory, if you have to take time off because you're injured or you just need time off, you haven't been able to be on the court, your body still remembers. You might have to work a little bit on your timing and your touch, but you still know those strokes. You know how to do that, and that's muscle memory. And it's the same thing with business development. So in order to get there and create those points of comfort and momentum, you have to practice them. And so that's what we're hoping that you can think of doing. Think about some goals. Think about the time you're going to dedicate, the cadence, to bring intention to what you're doing. So you can continue to think about that. Stephanie, we have any questions?
No, we got a really quiet group. But on the bright side, they use the chat to intro themselves. So I can't be too upset.
You're doing this. Good. Excellent. All right. Well, that'll move us then on to leveraging your network and not feeling icky, which again, some of the biggest objections.
Oh, we got his question now.
Oh, good.
Okay, so basically for this, I'm just going to stop presenting your screen real quick because that way you can read the question together. So here we go. It's a little bit of a longer one, but are there any recommendations for selling to small businesses specifically? So Sarah's startup partners with smaller local cafes, and they have found these small business owners are super busy, and the typical sales approach doesn't work with them, and it requires more personalization. But of course, the issue then is scaling. And I think this might be, valuable for a lot of people who have B2C type of companies and are just selling to, more mom pop shops as their bread and butter. So Dorothy, any advice for Sarah in this use case?
I think sometimes prototyping and thinking about having really personal conversations with some of those partners and those local cafes, especially in certain, kind of try to group them together, these types of cafes, these size businesses. Maybe these are coffee houses that are only open these certain hours, and kind of grouping them and having those conversations. What do you need, and asking them really, what are things that will make their businesses, what are the things that are difficult for their businesses right now? And what are the types of things, certainly with qualified questions where it's obviously in the areas that you can help or, people that can help them. But I think really asking them and engaging with them in a way where you're learning. I know it's not exactly completely the same, but when I opened an office for my old company 25 years ago, before I opened the office, I met with all the bankers and the lawyers, and I said, what do you need? What's important to you? When we're servicing, you're doing an IPO and it's 3 a.m. in the morning, what is the stuff that really is going to help that deal move in the way that you want it to move? And I built that and made sure that we addressed what their concerns were. So I think that just having those conversations with those other smaller businesses and finding out what their biggest concerns are and making sure that you're addressing them in how you're selling to them, because again, then you're not selling, you're really helping them solve a problem. Are there, and being able to scale that and prototyping, trying some things out in low risk situations and seeing if they are helpful. Sometimes bringing people together in think tanks. A lot of times other business owners want to know what everybody else is doing. How are they dealing with the pandemic? How are they dealing with insurance and business interruption? All those types of things. And sometimes being the conduit to bring some of them together so that they can have an exchange of ideas is also a good way. So sometimes dealing with things indirectly and solving problems actually will boost your sales efforts and instruct you into the areas that they care about most.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dorothy. And I have another one to kind of follow it up on this use case. So there was another question Submitted by Serge. So what I would like to do is I'd actually like to take this question, Serge, and kind of pivot it to a discussion that maybe everyone here can also benefit from as well. So Dorothy, I think kind of a good way to look at this question is almost advice. Like if you're, either have a software company or consumer company and you're looking to basically pre-sell, what type of advice would you have for that? Or even for either pre-selling, a tangible thing, or, beta selling, just trying to think of all of that type of stuff that founders might come across. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think it's kind of like that idea of like a prototype, like go to who is the customer that most is representative of who your target market is, and engage with them in a meaningful way and test some things out with them, addressing what those blips could be. Figuring out what your go-to-market strategy is, especially if they're representative of what your market is going to be, I think is certainly really, really helpful. Again, asking those questions before we started development dynamics. I literally spent a year talking to all my old clients who are the lawyers and the accountants. What is so hard? Why are your people suffering from business development anxiety? What are the challenges in your organizations that lead to, so I think having those discussions is really, really important. And then picking up kind of those like targets that are really representative of the clients that you want to go hit in your marketplace, and trying them out in a beta is really, really important and will be instructive for you. I don't know if does that answer the question?
I think it did from this end, but Serge, if you have a follow-up question based off of that, definitely feel free to use the Q&A tab. And guys, we do have 15 minutes left. So again, as a reminder, it's basically now or never. I think that's a good sales tactic as well, right? Like either, do it now or lose it, miss out on the opportunity. But with that stated, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dorothy, and I'll definitely hang out here and keep an eye for other questions that might come through.
All right, great. So thinking about your network, we're going to have you guys, I think a really good exercise, thinking about who are your targets. If you're at a very early stage and you have to think about who are the people that you're going to be selling to, who are the people that are connected to the people that I'm going to be selling to? How can I gather intelligence from the people who sit next to my targets, or who I think are going to be the targets? And what intelligence can we gather about those targets? So looking at, and that's going to be part of your network. Who are the most important people? Who do you already know? And can you kind of put them in buckets? Who do you already know that can help you expand the network, expand those meaningful conversations, expand your skill set, expand your knowledge or the intelligence that you need in order to be successful? Certainly researching is really, really important. Everyone has, I'm sure if I said to you right now, make a list of 10 people, you could make a list of 10 people, but you might not know everything about them that you should know in order to be as effective as you could be. So doing some research, and research could be looking at them online, looking at their companies online, certainly digging into LinkedIn. What kind of articles do they care about? What groups are they interested in? Using LinkedIn really as a tool for research to learn about your network. Who are they already connected to? Who are they not connected to? What do we have in common? Maybe we went to the same business school. Maybe we belong to the same organizations. All this is stuff is really, really important information. And everyone's always afraid of making a list. People get anxiety thinking about making a list because it gives them maybe I don't know the right people, or maybe I knew too many of these right people. But make a list, put them in buckets, do the research, identify them, because that's going to help you identify who you don't know and who you need to know. So looking back to that network, I want you guys thinking about who are people, where are my gaps that I'm going to have to address? If I don't know any venture capitalists, or I don't know the right kind of venture capitalists that are going to invest in my type of company or my industry, I better figure out a way real quick. How am I going to find them? Who do I know that can lead me to them? And being able to draw a roadmap for that.
And Dorothy, just a question from the audience to kind of piggyback off of that, and it might be related to making a list. But do you have any tips on how to actually, get in front of those larger companies that perhaps have are more procurement driven? That was a question submitted by Karen, but I know it's really difficult, especially for enterprise type of deals. Any advice there?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously like procurement is a whole nother, we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about procurement. Obviously, when you're thinking about big targets and big companies, doing a complete analysis of everyone that's important and who all those stakeholders are and who all the influencers that might be influencing those stakeholders. What is their process? So who can you learn from to learn more about their procurement process? Do they have a panel of specific vendors? Is there a process that takes 12 months? Are they under 4-year contracts? There's a lot of information that you gather about those types of really important strategic targets that you need to address before you just jump in, because you could really be wasting your time. You could spend a lot of time and realize they're only 1 year into a 4-year contract, and the process to become an approved vendor takes 2 years or takes a year. So it's really important to kind of do your diligence first, and understand what the requirements are, who the stakeholders are, and surround it as much as possible. And figure out, because there's the procurement people, there's the people who are influencing. You kind of really have to understand how whatever benefits you're going to provide, how they're going to be perceived, and what the perception is, or what the state of mind is of all those other stakeholders. And in order to do that, it takes time. It's not just, and there's a whole big theory on RFPs and like, when are they worth it and when are they not worth it? And there's a lot of questions. I mean, I could literally spend a whole day on just that. But what I can say is, to be short about it, is the due diligence that you do and understanding as much as you can about who the stakeholders are and what the process is with procurement. Does procurement just run the process, and it's really like the CFO who's going to make the decision based on understanding what that process is and what is expected and what the timing is, who else is in there, is all pretty important.
And then, okay, we got a couple more. See, they're all pouring in now. So I actually really like this follow-up from Angela over here from this end as well. So basically her question is like, when they were doing their due diligence to build, their startups MVP, they had a company or two that were interested in purchasing the product once it was live. And now that it's live, they are ghosting her. And I think this could potentially be, super useful across startups as well. Like, if you have a conversation with someone, and they're like, oh yeah, we're interested. And then all of a sudden they go away, and it doesn't even necessarily relate to an MVP. So what would you do in those use cases? Like, if, you hustled, you got the intro, you had conversations, and then like they just stop, like completely blow you off.
Well, sometimes it is how are you engaging with them in between? And like, were you continuing to engage with them? Did you engage them in the process of rolling out the project? Like, sometimes people want to participate in a beta if they're not going to be charged for it. Were there certain things that you could offer them to keep their engagement involved, that helps you launch that project that would also solve a problem for them? Let's say it's a company that's looking for a new product or service, and they're putting something out to RFP. Can you be the person that helps them put that RFP together so they're comparing apples to apples in the right way, and you have kind of some control? But I think part of the question is, how am I engaging with them? I think win-loss studies are really, really important. So if someone's ghosting you after, I think after the fact, the big question is, what did we do wrong, or what did we not do? Were we engaging? Did we engage with the right people? Because again, did you know the mindsets of everyone? So sometimes people who say they're the decision maker are not the decision maker. I think we've all run into those situations. Or sometimes the decision maker, you realized, you were only focused on one person, and there were 3 other people that you really should have been engaging with that you did not, that your competitors did. So I think it's really important, as you engage with potential customers, is really understanding who's making the decision, who's influencing, what's their state of mind, who else is talking to them, what way do they want to be engaged. We always say the closing part of sales is an afterthought. If you've done everything that you were supposed to do up until the point of close, the closing is like, who cares? You know what I mean? We've already closed it. Like, It's like nothing. So, and part of that is like in that engagement, you're building this offering for that specific customer to fit their needs, understanding what their priorities are, asking those questions all along the line, aligning. You understand what they're afraid of losing by signing with you. And so, once you lose it and you're ghosted, the other thing we always say is don't wait. Like, someone will say, we need you to put a proposal to us right away. And, we need this right away. And you go through like incredible sacrifice to get this proposal done right away. And then it's like crickets, right? They're ghosting you and no one knows. And you're like that movie, like Swingers, where you're like calling the person 50, like, do I call them? Do I wait 3 days? Do I wait a week? It's like uncomfortable. It's awkward. If you had done your job, perhaps in a different way. And at the beginning, I think it's really important to always qualify milestones and figuring out if you're launching a project and someone has an interest and you understand what their timeline is, when do you need to onboard this service in order to fulfill your needs? Okay, if you want to onboard it then, that means it needs to be live here. That means the process or procurement process is going to be taking place over this period of time. And you're kind of building a roadmap for them working backwards. And you're getting them to agree all along the line to each one of those milestones. Okay, if you need this by then, I'm going to get you a proposal by next Friday, and let's reconvene the following Wednesday. Is that cool with you? Oh, yeah, that's cool with, okay, let's put it on our calendar. So you already have these things agreed upon by the client or the potential client, how to move forward. So things don't just stall. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense.
And then the last thing I would say is win-loss studies are really important. When you don't get something or you lose something, especially if you're building something, you want to know why. Was it the team? Was it our approach? Was it our fees? Did our product not address? Asking those questions after sometimes people are uncomfortable, they're really important for you to build your offering. So understanding and asking and being brave enough to ask, well, why did we fail? Or what didn't we do? Or did we even fail? Maybe they ran out of budget. Sometimes that's the biggest, they just don't have the budget or it just becomes lower on the priority list.
Okay, and I think we have time for one more question, and then we are coming up on time. So last one of today is, as you're reaching out to everyone, and some of this might be actually touched upon in our next panel coming up, but Dorothy would love your thoughts on this too. Do you have any visual tools that you would suggest to keep track of, targets that you're going after?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's really like we obviously have to, there's CRMs, there's no shortage of CRMs, which anything that can help you, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be index cards, it could be a list. Make your list not only of the targets, but the people at the targets, all of the potential people and stakeholders at each one of those targets. Keep track of what they care about. Do that research, keep track, find a place to write it down that's going to be meaningful for you. It might not be a spreadsheet. Some people get, anxiety just from looking at an Excel spreadsheet. Some people are uncomfortable putting things in CRMs because they don't want certain information to be across the enterprise. But you need a system that's going to work for you where you can track what you're doing, with whom, and what the ROI is on all that activity. So there are tools, there's, no shortage of, which is a different conversation, I think, because there's, depending on what you need. The important thing is that you are writing it down and you're capturing that information. I was going to just say, I want to.
Yeah. I was going to say, any closing thoughts? I was going to go turn it over to you.
I was going to say, an activity for you guys, intention is really important in business development. So we'd like you write down 3 goals that you all have for Startup Boston. Think about making one of those goals to meet someone new. Think about what you're going to ask that person that you meet. And one of those questions probably should be, who do they need to meet? Who's important for them? What's an important contact for them to make at Startup Boston? Connect with them on LinkedIn immediately. And think about 3-5 people that you know that you might be able to introduce this new person that you met today. We'd love each one of you. If each one of you does that, I will consider this a successful conversation.
I'm with you guys. If you haven't already, take the picture of this screen so that you can have it, and then do that homework. And we want updates on LinkedIn. Use the hashtag SVW 2021 so that we know and can keep you posted. Anyway, how to say that last thing. So Dorothy, thank you so much for sharing. Like, honestly, this hour flew by. So thank you so much. Yes, please contact her, connect with her. Let me actually I'm going to throw Dorothy's LinkedIn in the chat as well. That way you guys can also, connect with her, follow her, see what she's up to. I'll do that in a moment. I should have honestly brought up the link earlier. I am on my A game right now, let me tell you.
But this is my favorite topic. So I love talking about business development. So if you want to reach out to me, call me, email me, text me, please do.
And her LinkedIn is now in the chat as well, guys. So you can definitely do that too. And with that stated, we do have our next sales event coming up in 15 minutes. It's all going to be about developing that sales strategy. So Serge and Mark, I know that you have unanswered questions, and I know that those two things are going to come up in about 15 minutes. So you should definitely tune on in and get those questions answered. And for everyone else, thank you so much for attending. Hopefully I'll see you again in a little bit. Dorothy, thank you again.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Startup Boston. Thank you, everyone.